Zhurak sat alone inside the medical ship, far from the war zone. Stars moved slowly outside the window, but his mind stayed trapped in the past. His eyes were cold, his skin pale, and his heart heavy. He had survived the human war. But something inside him had not. He had followed every order, completed every mission. He was trained as a soldier, not to feel. But now, every night, he saw the same things. Human screams, burning skies, the face of a small girl hiding in the rubble, and the humans, always fighting, always standing, even when they should have died. Zhurak was not a weak soldier. He had fought in 17 wars across 5 planets. His enemies cried, begged, ran. But humans didn't run. They didn't even blink. When they fought, it was like watching fire tear through steel. It wasn't just violence. It was something deeper. It was survival mixed with rage. And it scared him. He looked at the camera in front of him. This was the testimony room. He had been asked to speak for the Galactic Council. They wanted to understand why the human war had failed so badly. Why trained alien armies had fallen again and again. Why ships burned and fleets vanished. Zhurak knew the answer, but even saying it felt wrong. He took a deep breath and began to speak. Our orders were clear. Watch the humans. Report their strength. Avoid contact if possible. It was meant to be simple. Zhurak's voice was low and steady, but his hands were shaking. He remembered the first time he saw them. His ship arrived above a broken Earth colony. The place was in ruins. Buildings collapsed, smoke rose, and bodies lay everywhere. The alien high command thought it would be an easy scan. The colony was weak. Only a few human squads remained. They were tired, wounded, and low on ammo. Zhurak activated his stealth gear and dropped from the ship. He landed without sound. No one saw him. He moved like a shadow through the dust and rubble. He spotted a human unit, 6 soldiers moving in perfect silence. They didn't speak, but they moved like one creature. Each step was careful, each weapon aimed. Zhurak watched as they approached a broken building. Suddenly, a massive alien beast burst through the wall. It was tall, with metal claws and plasma. Breath. One hit could kill all of them, but the humans didn't run. One threw a smoke grenade, another rolled under the beast. 2 climbed onto the side walls for a better shot. They moved with speed and precision. Not one of them hesitated. In less than 30 seconds, the beast was dead. Black blood spilled over the ground. Zhurak couldn't believe it. They didn't cheer. They didn't rest. They simply moved forward, as if this was normal, as if death didn't matter anymore. I watched them fight like they were already dead inside, Zhurak whispered to the camera. But they fought harder than any soldier I've seen. Later that night, Zhurak followed the same unit into a dark tunnel. It was a shelter, filled with civilians, women, children, elders. The soldiers gave them food, shared their gear, and stood guard without sleep. One of them found a music player and started a soft human song. The others smiled, but their eyes stayed on the door. Then came the airstrike. The sky shook. Bombs fell. The tunnel cracked. Dust and screams filled the air. Zhurak had to choose, stay hidden or help. He froze, but the humans didn't. They formed a shield wall with their own bodies. One soldier ran into the fire to carry out 2 children. Another dragged an injured man while blood poured from his leg. None of them stopped, not even when the tunnel began to fall apart. Zhurak had never seen anything like it. They were not just fighting the enemy, he said slowly. They were fighting death itself, like they had made a deal with it. After the strike, Zhurak stayed hidden in the rubble, watching them. A soldier looked at a photo in his hand. A small boy and a woman smiled in it. The soldier touched the picture and whispered something Zhurak couldn't hear. Then he walked out alone into the night to set traps for enemy drones. He never returned. Zhurak sat in silence for hours after that. This was not war, he told the council. This was something older. Something human. He turned off the camera. His eyes burned. That was only the beginning. Zhurak stood at the edge of the battlefield. Smoke covered the ground like a thick fog, and fires burned in the distance. Bodies, both human and alien, lay broken across the soil. The air was full of the smell of ash, metal, and blood. He had been ordered to leave after the first report, but something stopped him. He had seen human soldiers do the impossible, and now he needed to understand why. What made them fight like that? What gave them so much strength in the middle of pain? Zhurak moved carefully through the ruined city. His stealth suit still worked, keeping him invisible, but his mind was not calm anymore. Every corner he turned, he expected to see death again, and every time he found life, it confused him even more. He saw a human soldier kneeling beside a dead alien. The enemy had attacked their group only minutes earlier, but the human didn't spit or curse. He didn't burn the body. Instead, he closed the alien's eyes and whispered something softly. Then he picked up a shovel and began to dig a shallow grave. Zhurak stared. Was this a trick? Was this weakness? No. The soldier's hands were strong. His face was quiet but focused. He wasn't doing it out of fear. He was doing it out of respect. Even for an enemy. Zhurak followed that same soldier for hours. He watched him help a wounded teammate walk, carry water for civilians, and set up traps with calm hands. But when he sat alone, he would pull out a photo from his pocket. The same woman and child were in the picture. He kissed the photo every night before sleeping in the cold dirt. Zhurak didn't understand. These humans were killers, no doubt. They shot fast, moved hard, and didn't back down. But they were not empty. There was something burning inside them. A reason. Later, Zhurak came across a group of soldiers hiding in the remains of a factory. One of them had just returned from scouting and brought news. Enemy drones were coming, fast. They had no backup, no transport, only a few rounds of ammo left. The commander, a woman named Sergeant Hale, stood tall. She didn't panic. She looked at her team and said one sentence. "We hold this ground. No one else dies today." Zhurak expected fear. He expected shaking hands, nervous eyes. Instead, the soldiers smiled. They set up their weapons, passed around their last pieces of food, and shared quiet jokes. One young man drew a small flower on the wall with chalk. Another played a soft tune on a broken radio. And one simply whispered to the wind, "See you soon, Mom." Then the drones came. Zhurak climbed to a rooftop to watch. He knew this was suicide. No alien squad would ever stand in such a hopeless situation. They would retreat. They would live to fight another day. But the humans stayed. When the first drone dropped, the sky turned blue with plasma. The ground exploded. The sound was louder than thunder, but the humans kept shooting. They fought as one. They didn't run. Even when one was hit, another covered him. Even when the wall fell, they pushed forward. They didn't cry. They didn't scream. They just fought. Zhurak couldn't stop shaking. He had been in wars, yes. But this wasn't war anymore. This was something more terrifying. These soldiers were not just fighters. They were protectors, survivors, and sometimes even martyrs. Zhurak moved away, his mind spinning. Later that night, he saw something that would never leave his memory. A child, maybe 7 years old, was hiding in a collapsed house. Her parents were dead. Her arm was burned. She didn't cry. She just stared. One of the human soldiers found her. A large man, covered in blood and dirt. He took off his helmet and knelt beside her. "I've got you," he whispered. "No one's gonna hurt you now." He carried her out, giving her water and wrapping her arm. Minutes later, he was shot. He died before reaching the medics. Zhurak stood above them, hidden. He wanted to cry, but he didn't know how. "These humans," he whispered to himself, "they kill without mercy, but not without hate. They die without fear, but not without love." Zhurak didn't follow orders anymore. He needed answers. He allowed himself to be seen. A human sniper spotted his cloaked movement and fired a warning shot. He raised his hands. They captured him, fast and hard. He was kicked, searched, tied, but he was not executed. Instead, they put a bag over his head and dragged him to a prison camp. He didn't know it yet, but what he would see there would change him forever. Zhurak sat on the cold metal floor, his hands tied behind his back. The human prison camp was not large, but it was strong. Tall fences, watchtowers, armed guards. Everything was made for war. He had expected pain, torture, maybe even death. But what he saw inside confused him. A young human soldier untied his hands. He didn't speak, just pointed to a corner where other alien prisoners were sitting. Zhurak walked slowly. No one beat him. No one yelled. Even the guards only watched. Silent, alert, but not cruel. Zhurak sat down beside two others from his species. They looked tired, weak, but not broken. One of them, Zhurak, whispered, "They give us food, water, medicine, but don't trust that kindness. They are not soft. They're waiting." Zhurak didn't answer. He had seen the battlefield. He had seen how these humans fought and died. But here, behind fences and guns, they showed something else. Control. Not once did a guard strike a prisoner. Not once did they show hate. But they made sure everyone understood. Escape meant death. Rebellion meant silence. And yet, they kept the rules. They followed something Zhurak had never seen in war before. Honor. Every morning, prisoners were lined, up and counted. Then they were given simple tasks: cleaning, carrying, helping in the camp. They were not tortured for information. Instead, the humans let silence speak. One night, Zhurak saw something he would never forget. A human soldier was sitting alone near the fence. He looked young, no more than 20 human years. He had a small notebook in his hand. He was writing something by flashlight, but he didn't notice Zhurak watching from the shadows. The soldier turned a page and whispered, "Dear Mom, I hope you're safe underground. I don't know how many of us are left, but I'm still breathing. We stopped an alien squad last night. I can still hear their screams. I wish I didn't have to do this, but I had no choice." Zhurak's chest tightened. The soldier wasn't writing a battle report. He was writing to his mother, and he wasn't proud of killing. He was afraid of it. The next day, Zhurak was taken to a small room. 2 chairs, a table, a camera in the corner. A human officer entered, female, calm, eyes sharp like blades. She placed a datapad in front of him. "Name?" He stayed silent. She leaned forward. "You're not a number here. You're a soldier, and we treat soldiers with respect. But we need to understand why your kind attacked our colony." Still, he didn't speak. She sighed. Then she reached into her bag and placed something on the table. A child's drawing. It showed a family standing under a burning sky. A girl with a red dress holding her father's hand. Behind them, a large alien warship. "My niece drew this," the officer said quietly. "Before the second wave hit. She didn't survive." Zhurak looked at the drawing. Something twisted in his gut. He had seen that girl before, hiding in rubble. He had walked past her body days later. He hadn't even stopped. The officer stood up. "If you can't talk, fine. But know this. We don't fight because we love war. We fight because we have something to protect." She left him alone in the room. Zhurak looked down at the picture again. Later that week, the camp was hit by a surprise drone strike. Not from humans, but from Zhurak's own fleet. The aliens were trying to erase evidence, including prisoners. Panic spread. Fire rained from the sky. Buildings shook. Zhurak could have escaped. But instead, he ran toward the flames. A human guard was pinned under rubble. Others were trying to lift the metal beam, but it wouldn't move. Zhurak joined them. "Move," he growled. "Now!" Together, they lifted it. The guard was barely alive. Zhurak carried him to safety. When the attack ended, the camp was broken. Smoke rose into the red sky. But no one spoke. They just stared at Zhurak. He expected punishment. A bullet. A cage. Instead, the officer from before walked up to him and nodded. "Thank you," she said. Zhurak didn't know what to say. For the first time in his life, he felt like a soldier. Not for his empire, but for something real. That night, he couldn't sleep. He looked up at the stars and wondered, What if everything he had been told was a lie? And what if the humans weren't monsters? What if they were the only ones who remembered what it meant to feel? Zhurak was no longer the same soldier who had landed on Earth with orders to destroy. His body was still strong, his training still sharp. But something inside him had changed. He no longer saw humans as targets. He saw them as something more, something he didn't fully understand yet. The camp was quiet now. After the drone attack, everyone worked together to rebuild. Humans and alien prisoners both helped move rubble, clear wreckage, and carry supplies. No one forced Zhurak to help. No one ordered him. But he still woke early and worked until his hands were sore. One morning, as he handed a water can to a young human, the boy smiled and said, "Thanks." Zhurak stared at him for a moment. That simple word, "thanks," felt heavier than any weapon. No human had ever thanked him before. Why would they? He had come to kill them. Later that day, a message came through the camp radio. The alien fleet was losing ground across Earth. Human resistance was stronger than expected. And the worst news: the aliens had started bombing civilian zones. No more mercy. Total war. Zhurak was taken back into the same cold room. The human officer placed a file on the table in front of him. "These are your people's new targets," she said. "Hospitals, schools, underground shelters." She tapped the photos one by one. "If we don't stop them, millions will die." Zhurak looked at the pictures. He saw children hiding underground, families trying to survive. He saw the same pain in their eyes that he once ignored. "I don't know who you are anymore," the officer said. "But if you have anything left in you that feels you'll help us." Zhurak didn't answer, but deep inside, something was breaking. That night, he walked alone along the fence. He stared at the stars above, the same stars that once looked like victory. Now they only reminded him of silence. He heard footsteps behind him. It was the same young soldier who had written letters to his mother. He didn't speak. He just stood beside Zhurak and looked at the sky too. Then he said softly, "Do you miss your home?" Zhurak blinked. I don't know." "I do," the soldier said. "I miss trees, the old lake, my little sister." He smiled without joy. "War takes those things away." Zhurak wanted to ask, "Why do you still fight then?" But the answer was already clear. They weren't fighting for power. They were fighting to protect what they loved. The next day, Zhurak made a choice. He stood in front of the command tent and said, "I will help." The humans were shocked. Some guards raised their guns. Others whispered behind his back, but the officer stepped forward. "Why?" Zhurak's answer was quiet, but firm. "Because I was sent to kill you, and you showed me how to live." Within days, Zhurak began working with human intelligence. He knew alien codes, fleet signals, and weak points in their systems. Every time he gave them something, it brought back memories of the soldier he once was. He remembered training camps where they told him humans were monsters. He remembered being praised for killing without thought. But none of that felt real anymore. What felt real now was the warm meal a guard shared with him. The way humans helped even their injured enemies. The soft music that sometimes played over camp speakers in the evening. One night, Zhurak stood near a fire where soldiers were resting. One of them passed him a metal cup filled with something warm. "Drink," the soldier said. "It helps the cold." Zhurak took it. For the first time in his life, he drank beside humans, not as an enemy, but as a brother in arms. But peace didn't last. A message came through. A massive alien assault was coming, bigger than any before. They had one goal: to wipe out the last major human colony on Earth. Zhurak's hands tightened into fists. That colony was where the children had been moved, where the injured rested, where hope still lived. He knew the codes. He knew the attack plans, but this time, he wouldn't help destroy. He would help defend. He looked at the human officer and said, "If we fail, we all die." She nodded. "Then we won't fail." Together, they began preparing for war. Not a war of hate, a war of survival. a war for something more than orders. As the night grew darker and the stars vanished behind clouds, Zhurak closed his eyes. He had been a weapon, a killer. Now, he was something else. He didn't know if he would live to see peace, but he knew, at last, what it meant to fight for life. Dark clouds rolled over the mountains as the ground shook with distant blasts. Zhurak stood on the high ridge beside human soldiers. Below them, the last colony flickered with lights, children, elders, wounded fighters, all preparing for what could be their final day. The humans called this place Haven 9. It was not a fortress. It was not built for war. It was built for hope. And now, the enemy was coming to destroy it. Zhurak had spent the last 2 days helping prepare the defenses. Traps, scanners, hidden weapons. He worked without rest. He no longer cared about orders or rank. He cared about survival, about protecting something real. The human officer approached him quietly. "They'll be here by morning," she said. Zhurak looked at her. Her face was tired, her armor scratched, but her eyes still held fire. "I want to be on the front line," he said. She nodded. "You earned it." That night, Zhurak sat near a small fire. Soldiers gathered around him, not to question him, but to listen. "What was it like?" one asked. "Being trained to kill us?" Zhurak stared at the flames. "They told us humans were weak, that you were scared, that you would run. But you didn't." He paused, his voice quieter now. "You held your ground. You bled for each other. You didn't fight to conquer, you fought to protect." No one spoke for a while. The fire cracked softly. "Why did you change?" another soldier asked. Zhurak looked up at the stars. "Because for the first time, I saw something worth protecting." The next morning, the sky turned black as ships entered the atmosphere. Alien drop pods crashed across the valley like thunder. Dust clouds rose. Lasers flashed. The war had come. Zhurak led one of the defense squads. He moved like lightning, fast, sharp, deadly. He used every bit of training the Empire gave him to fight against it. Beside him, human soldiers fought with everything they had. They didn't give up. They didn't break. Even as the enemy pushed harder, even when the lines began to fall, they stood their ground. Zhurak saw one young soldier, barely more than a boy, pinned under fire. Without thinking, Zhurak ran through the chaos, lifted the soldier with one arm, and carried him to cover. His armor was scorched, his skin burned. But he didn't stop. Hours passed. The sky was full of smoke. The ground shook with blasts. Zhurak's side was bleeding, a deep wound. But he kept fighting. Suddenly, a large alien walker broke through the last barrier. It was a war machine, huge, armored, deadly. It fired into the colony, killing everything in its path. The humans didn't have enough weapons to stop it. Zhurak looked at it. He had seen these machines before. He knew it's weak. "Spot, there was only one chance. I need explosives," he shouted. A soldier tossed him a charge. "What are you doing?" the officer yelled. Zhurak didn't answer. He ran, through smoke, through fire, through screaming. He ran straight at the walker. It saw him. It turned. A laser beam sliced past him, missing by inches. Zhurak leapt up the side of a wrecked tank and landed on the machine's leg. He climbed fast, ignoring the pain, ignoring the blood pouring down his side. He reached the top, pulled open a small panel, and shoved the charge. Inside, then he looked down. Below, the officer was watching. Her mouth moved, but he couldn't hear her. He smiled. And then, the world exploded. The walker collapsed in flames. The blast knocked everything sideways. When the dust settled, the machine was gone. And so was Zhurak. Soldiers ran forward, calling his name, but all they found was a piece of his armor, burned, broken, but still glowing. Silence filled the air. Later, after the battle ended, they buried him at the edge of the camp. Not as an enemy, not as an outsider, but as one of their own. The officer placed a simple marker in the ground. "Zhurak, he fought for us. He died, one of us." The young soldier, the one Zhurak saved, stood there, tears in his eyes. "He didn't have to help us," he said quietly. But he did, and I'll never forget that. The wind blew softly over the hills. Somewhere in the distance, the stars shone brighter.